Greetings! No, you have not made a mistake. You are indeed on Steve Gutenberg's Audiophiliac channel. I am Ken McAuliffe, the jazz vinyl audiophile, and Steve has asked me to choose my favorite rock albums with my favorite rock drummers. He asked me this question because I was a drummer for many years, and I've written for Modern Drummer magazine for probably 30 years. Steve asked that I also mention Ringo Starr, who I didn't really think of for some reason. To me, Ringo Starr is ubiquitous. Ringo is like the air. The idea that Ringo was not a brilliant, great drummer is based in some drummer's jokes that came out of the 1940s with big band. How many musicians in a big band? 16 musicians and a drummer. You know, that kind of nonsense. I have a list of 10 songs here that will attest to Ringo's brilliance. Ringo was the first modern drummer of the modern era. The modern era, which I take as being starting in 1963, I guess. You had studio drummers before Ringo, and you had studio drummers after Ringo, but the Beatles revolutionized music, pop music, revolutionized all forms of music, revolutionized the music business. I don't think it's too big of a leap to say that Ringo revolutionized modern drumming. The Beatles played so many different styles, every style imaginable, from avant-garde music, I Am the Walrus, Revolution Number 9, to ragtime music, Honey Pie, or stride you could call that, to reggae music, to heavy metal with Helter Skelter. He played everything. He could swing his ass off, and that's the essential thing that makes Ringo a great drummer that Pete Best did not have before him. With Ringo, and the reason the Beatles' music feels so good to everyone, whether they're 6 or 60 or 5 or 59 or whatever, is because their music grooves. It swings so hard, it feels so good, and that's because of Ringo, because Ringo was an incredibly swinging drummer. All music swings, whether it's jazz or not, and Ringo swung in every style he played. He brought a great feeling to everything he played. Never mind his beautiful ideas, his conceptions, and let me name off these 10 songs before we get into the other drummers. Rain. Ringo was a left-handed drummer. If you want a drummer's track, that's your drummer's track. He plays these amazing fills throughout the tune, and they sound strange because Ringo would start on his left hand or his right hand. So you get a really unusual take on things. Twist and Shout. Listen to the power of Twist and Shout, the way the Beatles played it. In My Life. Doom, bapa, doom, boom, boom. That weird sort of off-kilter drum pattern had been used before. But here, it's just unique and it's brilliant. As is I Am the Walrus. Basically a cut-up collage avant-garde piece. He created an orchestral score for that piece. The toms, it's beautiful. Something, the same thing, a beautiful tom work. His drums always sounded tremendous. Tell Me Why, an early Beatles song, swinging his butt off. Tomorrow Never Knows, which I think is a loop of him playing, but think about how beautiful that sounds. That tom tone is so perfect. It has a dip, and they looped it, and it worked. I Feel Fine. He's playing an Afro-Cuban beat there. And that harkens back to his days playing drums in Butland summer camp. He played in a lot of lounge bands, a lot of dance bands. He could play any style. And I Feel Fine is Afro-Cuban, and he swings his ass off with that. And that's hard to play. Finally, You Know My Name, Look Up the Number. It's a lounge tune, it's a jazz tune, it's a ska tune, all those things I just mentioned. So Ringo Starr is a brilliant drummer. One of the greatest drummers to have ever lived, in my estimation, because before there was Jeff Porcaro and Jim Keltner and Jim Gordon and all these brilliant studio drummers, and parallel with Hal Blaine, Ringo created the template for playing drums in many different styles. You can't mention 70s rock drumming without talking about Jeff Porcaro, the brilliant drummer for Toto who died too young. He played on so many hit singles, and the thing about Porcaro is he had a giant wide groove. I think the biggest groove as far as you could sit down in it like a couch and just ride of any drummer that's ever lived. It was a beautiful pocket. He had a beautiful touch. He had great ideas. He was a very self-deprecating drummer. His drumming on Africa, on Hold the Line, on so many great songs, it's just beautiful start to finish. A great big fat pocket. He played on so many wonderful records. Frank Zappa apostrophe with the great drumming of Ainsley Dunbar. Frank Zappa had an eye and an ear for brilliant drummers. He had brilliant drummers on throughout his entire career, from Ainsley Dunbar to Terry Bozzio to Vinnie Colaiuta to Ralph Humphrey to Chester Thompson to Jimmy Carl Black. And Apostrophe is one of my favorites. This is a beautifully recorded record. The drum sound is great, and these are very complex charts, as musicians would call them, and Dunbar just blows through them like it's nothing, and his ideas are beautiful. His time is great. The fact that you can even play these stuff, this is complex music. You know, some people laugh at Frank Zappa, oh, it's scatological, it's misogynist, it's juvenile, yeah, whatever. It's funny, it's humorous. It's a Broadway show set to music. A drummer that can play through this entire record is a great drummer, period, but Dunbar did so much work in so many different idioms. you know, from Zappa to Jefferson Starship to his own band. He played on, I mean, if you look up his Wikipedia, which I just did recently, I had no idea. He played hundreds and hundreds of sessions. And Apostrophe was Frank Zappa's big hit in 1974. Speaking of Berlin and Cannes, the avant-garde, I don't know what they were. Were they avant-garde, Cannes? In the 70s, late 60s, 70s? Jackie Liebzit, who came up with a very unusual style, I believe most of it linear, to play these very unusual songs, if you want to call that. They were improvs, part of the whole krautrock scene that included Amandul, and I can't even think of all the bands in the krautrock scene. That's a video unto itself. But Jackie Liebzit, who played on many of their records, Liebezeit, I often equate him with the New Orleans drummer. I equate him in a similar way that Zigaboo Modoleste played with the Meters. Very linear, very angular grooves, unusual patterns, not at all the standard 2/4 boom bop boom bop. Very creative, highly illustrative, ingenious, always in the pocket, but no other drummer could have worked as well in Cannes and their unusual music than Jackie Liebzit. For a more brash, punch to the gut, rock and roll, classic rock, English, Deep Purple, Smoke on the Water, and I wasn't really into Deep Purple until their latter albums like Burn and Stormbringer. And Ian Paice, on all their records, is just a monster. You know, flashy, kind of like a big band drummer. Incredible setups of all the changes, great technique, great pocket, very flashy, but always at the service of the music. Is he a sensitive, kind drummer? Could you have Ian Paice playing in Mumford & Sons? I think not. Clive Bunker, Jethro Tull, This Was. I probably have every Clive Bunker part memorized. I can sing them all to you. I can't play any of them, but I can sing them. Another drummer with amazing technique. He did some sort of studying or academic studies. He had beautiful hand technique. But mostly the ideas and the grooves and the concept he brought to Jethro Tull, like B.J. Wilson, another drummer I'm going to talk about here in a minute, they illustrated these songs beautifully. They never just played a straight beat. They came up with these beautiful architectural ideas full of nuance and shading and color, and it brought so much richness to this material. I mean, you can just not pay attention to it and it still grooves, but if you pay attention to Clive Bunker's drumming, Clive Bunker quit Jethro Tull at the height of their success right after Aqualung. He was tired of being on the road. He wanted to go and be with his family. But all the records he plays on, This Was, Benefit, Stand Up, it's a masterclass in truly creative rock drumming. Back to the U.S., back to the West Coast, Richie Hayward, Little Feat, an unusual band out of the West Coast that never, I mean, they were famous. Lowell George had more success, their singer-songwriter, and one of them, as a solo artist than the band did as a whole. But if you listen to his drumming, Richie Hayward's drumming on Cold, 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 or Tripe Face Boogie, or Easy to Slip, those are from Sailing Shoes. This is more the progressive album. Whew! Another guy, really deep pocket, sort of similar to Jeff Porcaro in a way, but maybe more mischievous, maybe more, there's kind of a New Orleans things happening with some of his grooves, but an incredible pocket. Another drummer who died young, in the 50s, I guess, not that long ago, but just his grooves are just something to marvel at. You can't talk about the late 70s in through the 80s without talking about Stewart Copeland. That band, the three of them were unique, and they brought something unique to rock music. I'd never heard a drummer play dub and reggae and ska before with this ferocious rock edge that Stewart Copeland did. This is one of my favorite albums for the track Reggatta de Blanc, where he's playing all this beautiful rim click information, then they add delays to it, so it's kind of a psychedelic space out event. And he was just so aggressive and pushing. He was a real fireball, manic energy. His tempos vary a lot because he's so excitable. Just a brilliant drummer, whether he was playing the first record, Outlandos de Amor, his drumming on Roxanne, the way he utilized the full kit, his feel, the sound of his drums, and his drumming still has repercussions today. If you listen to Danny Carey from Tool, one of today's great drummers, or Antonio Sanchez, another a jazz drummer who is the top of his game, takes so much from Stewart Copeland. Another bizarre step, we'll go back down south with the the country rock, progressive rock, folk rock of Captain Beyond and drummer leader Bobby Caldwell. Caldwell went on to play with Rick Derringer. I believe he played with Johnny Winter, Edgar Winter, but he did 2, maybe 3 albums leading this band, and he's just a these are progressive rock arrangements. They're somewhat complex, but there's a lot of acoustic guitar. It's kind of, psychedelic music. Bobby Caldwell is on fire. I think one of the top 3 rock drummers of all time, bar none, on every level. B.J. Wilson, who died at 43 from an accidental drug overdose. B.J. Wilson, like Clive Bunker, really knew how to illustrate and diagram and bring a song to life. There's a great video online of Procol Harum playing Repent Walpurgis, and watching him play, you're watching a conductor. He's conducting the band. B.J. Wilson was a master of that. All these little fine details he would bring out, and then he sat low, and his drums were really high, so he looks like a little midget, but he's not. He has a famous song, I think it's on Grand Hotel, called Octopus in the Bathtub, because he was like an octopus. He had an amazing groove, brilliant ideas. You can really hear it on the first track of this Joe Cocker album, With a Little Help from My Friends. The way he brings in the band, Jimmy Page is on that track, is just like an incitement to riot. Have to give a shout out to Mitch Mitchell. Finally, the very witty, whether he's playing drums or giving an interview, sharp, sly, extremely smart, unique thinker, innovative drummer Bill Bruford. This is a marvel of a progressive rock album. There was no one before Bill Bruford who sounded like Bill Bruford, but he's great on this record, his second record, Fragile. Listen to Heart of the Sunrise. King Crimson Red, Bruford's first solo album, the King Crimson masterpiece Lark's Tongue and Aspic, which includes demented but brilliant percussionist Jamie Muir. Back to you, Steve!